Hello, hello. Welcome, folks.
What's going on?
Rent versus Buy Part 2.
Part
We're back.
2.
We are back. Those of you who came to the OG.
Dose.
The OG Rent versus Buy debate.
Oh,
AJ and I, that was
2 years ago.
Spring of 20, beginning of 21.
Oh my gosh.
You were in Brooklyn? Maybe I was in Delaware
Brooklyn.
at the time.
I was in Brooklyn. I remember being obsessed with The Mandalorian at that time.
Ooh.
That if that places anyone in the history of
Wow.
the
I was still trying to get vaccinated. That was like a point in time where it's like you're not there yet, and so it's kind of that fun little like still kind of in my COVID cave, still baking, a few dozen oatmeal chocolate chip cookies a week and eating them myself, that kind of thing. So yeah, here we are. Love to see it. Lots of folks here today for our updated take on Rent versus Buy.
I'm just posting a link in the chat to the last time we did this.
I think I had more hair back then, more solid hairline.
You did. You had more face hair.
I had a beard too. Yeah. So new and improved, everyone. Here we are.
I look the same. Anyways,
give folks another minute or so to get in here. But glad that you all could join us here on a Friday, a rainy Friday here in Pennsylvania. Seems pretty rainy for you, AJ, in Brooklyn, or it's going to be.
Yeah, it's a little. Oh, it is raining. Yep, it's actively raining.
There we are. Awesome. Shall we get started here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's get into it. All right. Welcome, folks, to our webinar. I'm John Owens. I'm the Director of Financial Planning here at Brooklyn FI and AJ's sparring partner as we talk about renting versus buying. We're not going to go high school debate team style today, but we are going to go back and forth.
Hey, folks. I'm AJ Ayers. I'm one of the co-founders here at Brooklyn FI. Very passionate about this topic. This is one of the hottest topics in any conversation that we have with our clients. Like, this is a big decision you're going to make. So just happy to be here chatting with you, John. Awesome.
Well, a few things we're going to go over here today. We're going to go over our talking points. We pulled up the talking points we talked about a year and a half ago to see, have they changed? Has this guidance altered? What is different in the current environment? Good reasons to rent, good reasons to buy, which changed, what hasn't? Then we'll dive into the current state of the housing market. We got some nerdy charts to talk about things and how the current housing market should factor into your decision-making process. We'll have a bit of a discussion about what that looks like. And then we'll obviously have time for your questions. And so you can drop them in the chat or in the Q&A along the way, and we're happy to address them. We already got a few that folks submitted already. AJ, you want to go over the instructions here?
Oh, of course,
here?
Yes.
There's two
flight
overwing
attendant
exits.
here. Yep, fasten your tray tables in the upright and locked position. Please meet your Slack notifications. Like John said, please drop your questions. I like the chat. You can use the Q&A if you like. I'll be in the chat posting links as we're talking as well. We'll record this webinar, obviously, and post it on our website, brooklynfi.com/events. And yeah, let us know what topics are on your mind that you'd like to see us do webinars about in the future. And away we go.
All right, let's dig into it. So first, we got to agree on a few basic facts before we dive into this. These numbers have not changed since the last time we talked about this. I know there's been some inflation, there's been some volatility, but generally speaking, average home values increase about 3% a year. Some areas are higher than that, right? If you bought in, I don't know, the Silicon Valley, I don't know, maybe in 1980, you probably saw something different there, right? If you brought in Dearborn in 2007, you probably saw something different as well, other direction. Okay, rents tend to increase at a couple percent a year, in some areas higher. I know that currently we're seeing much higher rent increases for clients, but on average over the long term. Average person stays in a home for 7 years. It's unlikely that you will stay in a home for 30 years. You're probably never going to pay off your mortgage is the TLDR here. And then, an investment portfolio that's diversified over the long term should earn like up to single digits on average over the long term. The funny thing is that there are very few years when investment portfolios actually earn just upper single digit returns. It's kind of feast or famine. Most of the time, markets tend to be more volatile than that.
I agree.
So, rent. Team
agreed.
Rent. She's agreeing with the data that she put in the slideshow, everyone, just in case you were wondering. But team rent here, I'm on team rent. I debated the rent side last time. Like I said, we're not going to go toe to toe like last time, be cutthroat debaters, but we'll see. One of the reasons why renting is great is because browsing Zillow is a hobby. It's not an investment. We don't take stock tips from Reddit. Ooh, this one actually aged quite well. And we don't assume every home on Zillow is a good investment. And then I know there's that little slider and you can just be like, I can afford a $5 million house, right?
Yeah, this is a tough one, right? Because, I imagine a lot of you on this call either have a significant other or a group of friends or a sibling, and you're like, oh my God, look at this amazing mid-century house I found in this like little town out of nowhere, and it's only $300,000. Let's move there. Like, that is great. It's a great feeling. Honestly, like house hunting brings people together. It's a big purchase. You're going to do it with people you love, probably. Maybe you're going to do it by yourself. Like, that's a hobby, right? Like, let's separate out the house hunting from, is this a good financial decision for my family? Stay on Zillow, go wild, but let's think before we buy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Such a huge financial decision. Reasons to rent, buying a home is not as easy as you think. You need a whole team of people. You need a real estate attorney, you need a broker, you need a building inspector, a home inspector, you need a mortgage lender. It's an emotional roller coaster. I've never bought a house, okay, but I've ridden shotgun for more houses than you will probably ever buy in your lifetime as a financial planner. And it's constantly, we have an offer in place, we need to put this much down, want to update the plan, make sure that this works. How are we going to cash, we're going to turn this around? And then 2 hours later, they didn't take it. We were 7th in line. So they're not going to come back either. If the first 6 people flake out, like we probably don't want the house either because there's something wrong with it. Maybe it's haunted, right? But competitive markets create demand, requires more cash down. Last year, we were seeing a lot more all cash offers as well on houses and those sorts of things. And so it is not an easy thing to do to buy a house. Got to be mindful of that.
Yeah, and it's also expensive. There's a lot of hidden costs. We got to have our cash ready for the down payment, but we also have to have cash ready to go. And by ready to go, we mean in your checking account, ready to get wired or ready to go through a cashier's check. Like the actual steps of buying a home, I actually did recently purchase a home, are a bloody nightmare, to be honest with you. There's lots of people involved. There's lots of phone calls. We have a lot of clients who don't like to be on the phone. Like you are going to have to be interfacing with banks, with FedEx, who FedEx your closing documents to the wrong address. And it is a stressful process. It's not a reason not to buy a home, but just making sure you know what you're getting into and that you have the right partners with you, whether it's the person you're buying the house with or the people advising you on the house, advising you on the location, advising you on the mortgage, all of those things together. So we got
buying a home is so much different than like buying that sweatshirt on Amazon that you thought you liked, and then it comes in and like you just print out the label and send it back. Though using a printer is a pain in the ass, but buying a home, it's like there's not a return policy. Keep that in mind. Did
you see that? Was it in? I'm gonna get this wrong. I think it was in New Hampshire. It was the first house sold as an NFT. I'm curious what that's going to look like. So maybe in the future you can just return your house with a printed QR code. However, if that exchange gets hacked, losing a house is a lot bigger than a couple tokens in your wallet. Anyways.
But another reason why we like renting, especially versus buying.
The drama of this slide.
The drama of this slide, yes. I remember making this, by the way. This is I minored in graphic design. I'm joking, I didn't. Low transaction costs, right? When you rent a place, you don't need that 20% down payment. That could be, in many cases, where our clients are buying, New York, San Francisco, they're buying houses that are upper $100,000s, a couple $1 million potentially. Like you need hundreds of thousands of dollars to put down on this. Okay. When you rent, you need like the first and last month's rent, a security deposit. Okay. In New York, you might pay a commission to a real estate agent of like 1 month's rent in order to get the place. But there's not that surprise closing costs along the way with renting.
Well said.
Another reason we like renting, we don't pay property taxes, at least not directly, assessments, HOA fees, all those things that folks, say, I bought a house, so my payment's fixed. No, it's not. There's a fixed component of your monthly expense, but there are other pieces that increase. Now, rent can still go up, but you negotiate it. Some environments are more tenant-friendly than others. The tenant-friendly environment a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, when we did this webinar the first time, was much different than it is today. We were seeing concessions, a couple months free. Now we're seeing huge increases. there. The government, when you own property, like, okay, here's we want our tax money, and property taxes are a huge thing, especially for our clients that are living like Westchester County, Northern Jersey, those things, very high property taxes.
Austin, Texas is a funny one. Texas famously does not have an income tax, but the property taxes in Texas will get you. So as you're thinking about, what is the right location for you, property taxes could be a large part of your yearly payment. So another great
Somebody's
got
to pay Walker, Texas Ranger's salary.
Sure. Someone's got to pay those property taxes. If you're renting, that's your landlord's problem, not yours. Of course, it'll be baked into your rent, but you don't have to think about it. Absolutely. Also, property tax bills are really confusing. We've had some clients who have just become homeowners for the first time be very perplexed, myself included, about what is actually on this property tax bill. When you're buying a home, like we've mentioned before, like there is all this complexity. We just want to make sure that you're prepared for that. And that's what John and I do all day, is we walk you through the complexity. You get a weird piece of something in the mail, you email it to us, and we go, let's figure it out together. And
let's take a look, right?
Yeah, we'll understand if this is actually a property tax bill or if it's just an informational notice of property taxes you've already paid.
Yeah. Mills. Get familiar with the term mills. What's a mill? Property tax language there. Diversification, right? Your net worth is not all stuck in an illiquid asset when you rent, right? For most folks, not necessarily saying our clients, but for most folks, so much of their household wealth is tied up actually in their house. It's the biggest asset that most people own. And then by renting, by not tying up assets there, you're able to put money into a business, retirement accounts, and other more diversified or liquid investments. Awesome.
Yep.
Homes aren't great investments. They appreciate a few percent a year on average, right? They're a huge time suck. This is a picture of AJ renovating her recent purchase, and they're illiquid. And so a lot of those success stories, AJ, what's going on with the bangs there? Was that a phase?
That was a bad haircut.
Yeah, that's not actually AJ, but it does look a little similar. It's been nice working with you all. No, just kidding. But yeah, a lot of times the success stories leave out how much money they put into it, or how much blood, sweat, and tears they put into it to kind of get that sweat equity. And a lot of folks that we work with, a lot of clients we work with, like literally don't have the time to put that sweat equity in the house. And that means you're paying somebody else to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love, HGTV as much as the next person. Those are reality television shows with budgets that are designed to entertain you, not necessarily talk about a good business model or a good thing that you should sink 75% of your net worth into.
Yeah, my favorite part is when they just like get the sledgehammer out and they just like start destroying things, like ripping the cabinets off.
It's great TV. It's brilliant TV. I love it. Can't get enough of it.
All right. Another kind of pivoting and building off of that. Nobody buys their house and keeps it the way it is. Okay. I've never had a client, all the times I've worked with clients, help them buy houses, say like, okay, and then we're just going to keep it exactly the same. We're not going to pay anything. We're not going to buy any furniture. We're going to take that IKEA couch we've had since college, plop that sucker right in the living room. I would probably do that. But, renovations cost a lot of money. They often run over budget. We're seeing supply chain issues, inflation issues currently, and things get delayed, and that adds to cost. When you're renting, you're not renovating. There are some people who rent and paint the walls. Okay. That's always been kind of crazy to me.
You got to throw a fresh coat on. Also, pro tip for renters, if you are in New York City, there is a law that your landlord must paint your apartment every 3 years. So if you have lived in an apartment for more than 3 years, they are required to paint it. So if you would like a fresh coat, please email your landlord. Yeah. If you don't want to poke the bear because you like your apartment, maybe just paint it yourself. Grab a $25 can of Valspar and go to town. But
there you go.
That's fun.
Another reason why we like renting, selling your home is hard and expensive. This must be a holder from the last time we did this webinar. Hey, AJ, how's that home sale going for you? That's done and over with now, right? This was almost 2 years ago.
No, it's not. Yeah.
You didn't sell it yet? Really? I thought it was so easy. Isn't the market great? What do you mean?
Yes, that is true. It can be difficult to sell your house, right? Selling a large asset to another person who's going to need to go to a bank. If there are any hangups with the city, with contractors, with the building, if you're in a co-op or a condo association or things like that.
Litigation, that kind of stuff.
Litigation. I have it's not even worth telling you. It's a very boring story. There's a litigation involved in my building, and our home has been trying to be sold for almost 3 years now. And that's causing some interesting financial situations in our family. So it's not always as easy as like, well, let's buy the house, and if we get a job in LA, we can always sell it in a few years and it'll be fine. Like, just think about it. It's not a quick, easy transaction. And we're not trying to scare you. I know a lot of you are looking to buy a home. We will help you buy that home, but we just want to make sure that you have to set expectations. You want to make sure you're aware of all the things that could be coming down and causing you some stress, because it is stressful.
It's not like the ETF in your brokerage account that I could log in and sell right now in 5 seconds, right? And sellers are anchored to the price that their neighbor got in January 2022 when the market was peaking, right? And interest rates were a hell of a lot lower than they are today. But hey, if you throw in a free pizza, I wonder if that would help decrease the time to close.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot from sellers who just are, there's a price there, and homes are not moving the way that they were, earlier this year or even last year. So if you are trying to sell a home to buy another home, you might have to do a little bit more price equalization than previously thought at the, I don't want to call it the top of the market, but in 2021, when it was certainly very much a seller's market.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cash flow, another reason to rent. Okay. When you rent, your rent is your ceiling. That's the most you're going to pay towards housing. When you buy a house, your mortgage, property taxes, interest, homeowners insurance, that's your floor. That's the least you're going to pay towards your housing. Okay. Oil burner breaks, stuff like that happens. You've got to do that. You got to put a new roof on it, whatever it might be. Lose your job, take a pay cut, you just move to a cheaper apartment. Okay. It's not great, not a fun thing, not a conversation we enjoy having, right? But that's an option. When you own a house, it's a lot harder to do that. It takes more time. It can be a bigger challenge.
Absolutely. And this ties into our kind of like our number one reason to rent. These aren't necessarily in order, but I do think this number one is my favorite reason to rent. And that is having the flexibility, right? Are you quitting your job? Is your girlfriend breaking up with you? Are you moving across the country? Are you doing all three at the same time?
Have you done all three of those at the same time twice? Anyway, I'm not speaking from experience. 2 out of 3, whatever.
So yes, moving your house, like where you live, where your home is one of the most important things that leads to happiness, right? We do a lot of life planning with our clients, and one of the things we always hear is, I want a beautiful space, whether it's a cabin or an apartment or a home where I can be with my family. And we do all this like vision questing of like, what makes you happy? And what would you say? 80% of people say, when I vision my ideal life, I'm at a party with all the people I love in my beautiful home. I'm in my backyard. And so like that idea of this home, is so important. And I think we get so anchored to that. But like for some people, it can take a long time to get there. And it's not really that easy to leave for whatever reason, right? So we think about like, we moved to a new city for a job and we bought a house. Well, that job changed. Now we got to sell it. And now we've actually created unnecessary financial stress in our family because we bought a house. And if we had just rented, we get a new job, you break the lease, maybe you have to pay a few months lease, you load up the moving truck, pay a few $1,000 and you're in the next spot. So we are big fans of having that flexibility in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is key, especially when you quit your job, your girlfriend breaks up with you and you move across the country a couple times. Anyway, nonetheless, so no, it's a little small, but we did find a house that is within your price range, folks. I love these WikiHow images, by the way. One of my favorite meme accounts. But AJ, time to talk to you about buying and why folks should buy a house. And those are all the slides we have for today. So we're done. Thanks, folks. It's only rent. Okay. I'm just kidding. But let's dive in.
Great. Yeah. So what is a great reason to buy a house? You have access to cheap or gifted capital. I have never heard of someone saying, here's hundreds of thousands of dollars, child or grandchild, why don't you go invest in the stock market, right?
I mean, clients say that to us all the time, but
that's true. That's true. But
grandma doesn't say it. Grandma never said it to me.
Just to be clear, it's their money. They're not giving it to us.
Yes, correct.
Just want to say that for the tape. But if you have wonderful people in your lives who have money that they don't need, what's one of the things that they want to say? Wow, I really want you to have this beautiful home with that beautiful backyard to raise your family in. Here's $300,000. Like that is a good reason to go and buy a house. That is going to potentially get you to that next level that maybe you couldn't get there on your own.
That's a
older
great grandma.
generations,
That's an awesome
yeah,
grandma there. Wow.
we love that grandma. We love that great aunt. We love that chosen family. And I don't mean to be crass, but like, if you don't know, ask. You never know. Are there people in your life who might have a wonderful financial situation? Maybe it's a loan, maybe it's a gift. Ask around. That is a great reason to get some capital to start that home ownership process. Older generations love real estate. They're attached to it. They want to have that satisfaction, that feeling of, wow, I helped you get into this first home, or I helped you upgrade, into a home that could fit your expanding family or what have you.
Absolutely. So important.
Great reasons to buy. Mortgages are awesome.
Still?
Sometimes. Right. So why are mortgages great? Typically in the first 10 years of your mortgage, you are paying quite a bit of the interest on the mortgage, which, thanks to our tax code, is actually partially tax deductible. So as you are, we'll get into a slide where it actually shows a mortgage breakdown in a minute, but basically you're not necessarily building up equity in those first couple of years because you're still just only paying interest, or mostly interest. That's going to be a great tax deduction for you. At the end of the year, you're going to get Form 1098 from your mortgage lender. You're going to send it over to your tax preparers here. We're going to take that deduction on your tax return. So that's nice. Mortgages are, once we're through that interest paying period. I know, John, you want me to talk about how interest rates have gone up. It is an opportunity to build up equity, to own this property, to potentially have a profit in the future. And your mortgage payment does stay the same if you don't refinance. So your income will go up, hopefully, and your mortgage payment stays the same. So kind of unlike rent, which likely will go up at the floor 2%. In some cities right now, we're seeing 50% a year, which is just bananas. Your mortgage payment stays the same. It's pretty standard. Property taxes will go up, but that amount that you pay each month is fixed for the term of your mortgage. We typically see 30-year mortgages. Very rarely do we see shorter 15-year terms. Usually not a great reason to do that. Back when we did this webinar, mortgage rates were quite low. We were seeing clients, I think we had one client get below 2% on a 7-figure mortgage, which was the lowest I saw. But we were really looking at around 2.5% to 3.5%. Now in 2022, as we close out the year, we are looking at mortgage rates with a great credit score between 6% and 8%. So that has increased quite a bit. Unfortunately, a lot of folks who would have been able to afford a house at this time last year at a 3.5% rate, now this interest rate has caused that monthly payment to become unaffordable. So that's an unfortunate consequence of the market that we're in right now.
Absolutely. And we'll take a look in a little bit at the trend of rates over the long term and what that data looks like and where it could be heading. So how the hell does a mortgage work, AJ?
Yeah, how does it work? So what we've got here is a cash flow. So those of you who are clients will recognize this as from Bright Capital, our lovely financial planning tool. So what we're looking at here is the entire term of a mortgage. So our first year, 2022, going all the way through 2051. I skipped a few years so I could fit some numbers on the slide here. But what we're looking at is a home that we purchased for $1 million. We put a typical 20% down payment down to secure that, to start to build up some equity. So we have some equity in the home. We use some cash to buy that asset. And so we're looking at an $800,000 mortgage. And I'm simplifying things a little bit here. So we ran this through our mortgage calculator. And essentially what we're looking at here is two things that make up our mortgage payment, which is our mortgage interest and our mortgage principal. So in the first year of our mortgage, we'd be looking at paying about $24,000 in mortgage interest. Now, that would be deductible on our tax return. And we're building up some equity. So we're paying back, almost $17,000 of that principal. But as we go through the years, assuming we do stay in this house for 30 years, if you look at it in that last year, we're basically only paying principal at this point. So, even as we get to later years, we're paying less and less interest and we're starting to dip into that principal. So yeah, in the last year, we only have $650 of deductible mortgage interest. So as you can see, the tax breaks in those first 10 years of that mortgage are quite appealing. However, we're not building up equity as fast as most folks would like. So yeah, there was some tax law changes in 2018 that basically limits the amount of mortgage interest you can deduct to houses basically the maximum purchase or maximum house value you can deduct your mortgage from is $750,000. So if you get a $3 million house with a $2.5 million mortgage, unfortunately, you couldn't deduct, the 6 figures in mortgage interest. You're going to be limited. So that's with our 3% interest rate. So this is basically where we were back 2 years ago. Now let's look at what happens with a 6.75 interest rate, which is kind of where we're at right now. So same situation, $1 million, 20% down, $800,000 mortgage. Wow, that basically doubled, right? Lot of interest. I mean, it makes sense, right? We went from 3% to almost 7%. That's a nice hefty mortgage interest deduction, but that is a very large payment. Sorry, John, can you go back to the other slide for 1 second?
Sure, absolutely.
Because we've got 85,000 in our total housing cost versus 63,000. So essentially, it's gonna cost us $22,000 more in this year to buy that same, in the first year to buy that same house because of our mortgage rate. So as you can see, we're still paying so much less in principal here. And then when we get to the end of the plan, same, all the facts are the same. But yeah, this is not a great story here, right? When you look at it this way, it does seem like, wow, am I ready to pay this much in interest to get into this house right at this moment? So what does it look like if we compare the two of these? So yeah, same principle, but basically as we've paid this mortgage over 30 years, as you can see, these numbers are quite different. That almost 4% difference over a period of 30 years on a $1 million home is pretty dramatic. Now,
650 grand.
A lot of money. Now, is that a reason not to do this? Absolutely not, right? First of all, we talked about earlier how most people don't stay in their house for 30 years. Most people stay in their homes for about 7 years. So we're not necessarily going to be locked into this payment for 30 years. Also, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this term refinancing. So as interest rates move, the economy is cyclical. We would expect interest rates to come back down at some point in the next 5 to 10 years. So that would probably be a great opportunity for you to say, hey, can you please refinance my mortgage, which is at 6.75 to something lower? A bank will happily do that for you for a small refinancing fee, which they're happy to collect. Fun exercise. If you have any older friends or relatives who purchased homes in the early 1980s, ask them what their mortgage rate was. And you will
My
hear
parents
double.
did.
Yeah, what was your parents' rate?
I think it was a federally subsidized mortgage at like 15%.
Yep.
So
yep,
that was a
digits.
great deal back then.
Yep. So it's cyclical. There are great reasons to buy homes throughout all economic cycles. Let's keep going. What's a great reason to buy a home? Automated savings. How many of you put automated savings into a savings account or brokerage account every month and never touch it for 30 years? Yeah, nobody does that, right? Goes into a savings account, it's getting saved for something, goes into an investment account, it's growing, but at some point it's going to get sold to support you. When it's going into a home, it's staying there, right? You can skip your monthly transfer to savings. You cannot skip your mortgage payment. If you do that a number of times, your bank will say, thank you, I will take this house back now. That's called foreclosure, right? So your savings account is not going to foreclose on you, but your bank will if you don't pay your mortgage. I love that. To me, this is a great reason to buy a home, and I think why probably my number one reason, honestly, from a financial planning perspective, from a best practices perspective. Saving is hard. It's really hard. As humans, it's really hard to take money that we want to spend on something that we can see and save it for this unknown future. This is literally a great way to do that. As we saw in the last slide, sometimes it's going to pay down that mortgage interest, but you definitely are building up equity each time you make that mortgage payment. Anything to add here?
No, I mean, I think it's a great point that it is somewhat a forced savings, and I think a lot of people build their wealth in the equity that they have in their home, and that can be really instrumental in the terms of somebody's long-term financial plan.
For sure. For sure. If you can pick a winner, number 7, the market. The rental market is expensive, and buying a home is sometimes the only option. Typically, we see this in smaller towns, like you want to live in a very specific place, not a great rental market, whether the properties are, you don't like the properties or there just aren't a lot of rentals. We're kind of seeing this right now in New York City. Rents are so unbelievably high that many folks are just looking to purchase a home because they can't stomach paying double what they would have paid last year. But yeah,
and that's
if you
not
pick a winner,
necessarily a good enough reason in and of
True.
itself to buy.
that is true. That is true. It does move the needle a bit for some folks though. Getting in and picking a winner, right? If you bought a home in Austin, Texas in 2009 and you were in the right place at the right time, you would probably be doing pretty well right now, right? Austin blew up in terms of a center for tech. There was a lot of money that poured into the city. A lot of people were ready to spend 7 figures on homes that were previously purchased for under $200,000. If anyone
Shane
wants
almost
to
bought a place.
if anyone wants to
right.
bug Shane or make him feel bad, ask him about the house he almost bought in Austin in 2009.
Shane pulls it up on Zillow and cries like twice a year thinking about it. But anyway,
we don't like to dwell on missed opportunities.
We don't.
Great reason to buy. Number 6, taxes. We talked about that mortgage interest deduction extensively. There's also a property tax deduction available under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA. And one of my favorite things about a home purchase and being able to sell it later is that your gains on that primary residence, right? We're not talking about rental properties. We're not talking about vacation properties. We're talking about the house you live in. If you sell that, and you've lived in the house, I think if you've lived in it for 3 of the past 5 years, you sell that, you get to exclude $250,000 of your gains, and then $250,000 of your gains with your spouse as well. So potentially $500,000 of gains on that house, you don't have to pay taxes on. I don't know of many other assets where that's allowed other than in tax advantage retirement accounts. So
yeah, 2 out of the last 5 years is your primary residence. So you have a clock. You have to decide if you're going to sell it within 3 years of moving it out, making somewhere else your primary residence. Perhaps if you have 2 homes, you can only take that exclusion once every few years, and so you can't like rinse and repeat it like a few years in a row.
You can't flip. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So interesting thing that's happening in my personal situation is that this is taking so long that the clock is actually starting to run out on personal residence. Luckily, the market's so crappy that there's not a lot of gain to talk about anyway, so it's not much of a concern. Just things to think about, folks. I know we're in the reasons to buy section, but just some personal color to think about. This is my favorite photo of Bill Clinton, by the way. Anyway,
this one here, the dogs, the puppies.
Yes, this is Bill Clinton.
Oh.
Thank you, John. Always.
I thought you meant this puppy lady. I thought this might be a glimpse into your future.
Reason to buy. Number 5, security. Having a place of your own, having as many pets as you want, having as many kids as you want. Your landlord cannot kick you out when they sell the building. This is important for a lot of parents who want security for their kids, right? We don't want to be moving around every couple of years. You want to have that place that you know is yours and is not going to change. We have seen more of this in recent years, or I've come across it more in recent years, where actually, unfortunately, if you do own your home, you can actually be forced to sell. Let's say the city decides to build a road right through your house, or the ground beneath you becomes unstable, or you are in an area where it's too expensive because water is too scarce. So just some things to think about. But when you own that home, it's yours. No one can kick you out of it, except the government. Eminent
domain. So didn't get any guesses on how many puppies there are in this picture, by the way. I feel like it's like a little, like those jars when you go to like those contest things, like guess how many M&Ms are in here, you win a prize. So
great. Another great reason to buy. It is tangible and easy to understand. Real estate is something that you can feel and touch. This is my house, I own it. This is my beautiful property. Come over, let's have drinks. John, you need some decor behind you. This is embarrassing. Your family's gonna be very proud of you. Your friends are gonna be impressed. Like, this is a great reason to buy a home, right? Like, I did this thing. I am successful. Look at the fruits of my labor. You can't host a party and your stock portfolio. It's not really that sexy to talk about your portfolio at parties. You can't invite people over to enjoy it unless you're John Owens, which is really embarrassing. And also the stock market can be intimidating, right? It's a thing that is hard to explain. It's very easy to explain. I bought this beautiful house. Here's the Zillow link. Take a look at it. Is anyone else really creeped out that everyone can know how much they bought their house for? That just like creeps me out to know.
Oh, that's like public record that you can like.
Record. Yeah. So if you're like, oh, I bought a house, and someone's like, what's the address? They're really asking, how much money do you have?
Well, then they want to
did
see
you
what it
spend
looks
on your
like too,
house?
because if it's on Zillow, there's a bunch of pictures they can
Yeah, I
see. They can see how much you spent for it. They can see what your mortgage payment probably is, what your property taxes are.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's messy. Number 3, building equity. As we saw from our mortgage illustration, it takes some years to build up that equity, but that down payment that you put in right away, you have some equity. We've also seen when housing prices increase so rapidly, that's a great opportunity for you to build even more equity. And one of the things that we love about home equity is that you can tap it when you need some funds. So for example, you buy a home, you have a nice down payment, you've been building equity for a couple of years, time to renovate the bathroom. I need $100,000 to get that done. I don't necessarily have to use my cash or my investment portfolio to do that. I can actually borrow against the equity that I built up in my home. We call that a home equity line of credit, or a HELOC for short. We love HELOCs mostly for home improvement. Don't love using them for emergency. I mean, it is kind of like a backup emergency fund.
Should I use it to buy GameStop or Bitcoin?
No.
Okay, just checking.
Reason to buy number 2, lock in a low housing payment. You can potentially retire without significant housing costs. Not having a rent or mortgage payment when you own your home outright allows you to keep your withdrawal rate low. John, you want to explain what we mean by that part about the withdrawal rate, keeping that low?
Yeah, and so when you retire, we want to typically take a withdrawal rate of less than 4% of your savings on an annual basis, and even less than that if you retire early at a younger age. And so by reducing one of your biggest expenses or causing it to go away, you can reduce your withdrawal rate significantly. Because if you think of your expenses as 30% or 40% related to housing, not having any housing costs because you own your house outright, or minimal housing costs because you only have to pay property taxes and homeowners insurance, can be a key ingredient in financial independence. I used to work with a lot of retirees though, and a lot of times the strategy is, if you don't pay off your house when you're about to retire, right before you retire, you refinance it for another 30 years so you can keep your withdrawal rate low that way, because who the hell cares?
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Take that payment, make it a couple $100 even if you're.
Exactly.
Yeah, love it. Year 29 on the mortgage, cast it out for another 30
Another
years.
30 years. Let's go. Let's do this, Grandma. Sorry.
Number 1 reason to buy, the feels. It feels good to buy a house. We can't ignore that, right? The number 1 reason is because you want to own a home. You find a home that you love and it speaks to you, and the walls tell you things, and you envision your future happy self.
Walls are talking in this house? What?
You know what I mean? Like, look at this like lovely den with these Eames chairs in it. Like, don't you just want to like sink into those chairs and have a conversation, pour your nice glass of smoky mezcal? Like, I can see us there, John, at our old age. Anyways, renovating yourself, painting walls, drilling holes, to like redecorating your house, that is a great feeling. And is there anything better in life than custom built bookshelves? That is my question that I leave all of you with.
Oh, okay. Look at your background right now. Okay.
Just saying. Anyways, we've got some numbers. We got to talk about the current state of the market. So look,
Yes.
we didn't really get into debatey this time, but look, there's great reasons to buy. There's great reasons to rent. Let's talk about the state of the market right now.
I had a bunch of ad hominem attacks that I was like ready to roll out against AJ here and brawl, but we'll behave. Okay. So a couple of things we want to look at in the current state of the market with home ownership, with housing supply, with interest rates. And so we can see here that interest rates on 30-year mortgages here are creeping up closer to 7% currently. And that's the highest place that they've been since basically before the global financial crisis, right? We saw them peaking out in that area about 15 years ago, give or take. But relative to where rates have been historically, like we talked about, my parents bought their first house in 1982. Their rates were in the mid to upper teens. Another period in time though where we had a high level of inflation. Okay. What's interesting though is that you can see here the gray areas are U.S. recessions, and in just about every recession, mortgage rates come down. Why do mortgage rates come down during recessions? Because one of the ways the Federal Reserve helps stimulate the economy is by cutting interest rates. And they cut interest rates, mortgage rates are correlated with that, they come down. we are not, at least currently, in a recession, and rates continue to rise up. But the thought is, if we do head into a recession, mortgage rates may likely fall at that point in time. Beyond that, housing prices are continuing to go up. And so if we think about the landscape, more interest rates are the highest point they've been in 15 plus years, and housing prices are still high. They actually haven't started to come down. Now you can see here, again, many recession, we see housing costs come down. We saw them come down big time here during the real estate induced market crash of 0809, a little bit more in the dot-com bubble here, slightly here during 2020.
Right where I sold my house, right when the prices came down. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, but right now prices of homes are still rising, and we haven't seen a reflection in the housing market prices to account for the fact that interest rates are much higher. The reason why? Supply and demand. Demand remains very high for homes coming out of COVID. Supply is still quite light. And so if we take a look at housing supply, it really hasn't drastically improved. It dropped off a cliff in 2020 because you didn't want anybody to come in and look at your house during COVID. No, stay away. Nobody was moving or trying to do that.
Yeah, and basically we had a freeze on new construction. A lot of investment projects were pulled out. A lot of new developments. I'm sure you see them in your cities. You see these buildings that are half built. That's what this big drop off is. It's recovered somewhat since then. Construction projects have resumed. Now we see some supply chain issues. Like, we could talk about this chart all day long.
We're still behind, right? We still haven't played catch up for the supply needs, for the fact that we don't have enough houses. And so it doesn't necessarily point a picture of the housing market, of that pricing chart that we just showed starting to come trailing off when we look at the supply piece. What we might see, though, is that it might start to level out. You've seen a fairly significant jump in housing prices here over the last couple of years coming out of the crisis. And then we have rents, on the other hand, which a year and a half ago, when I was in the process at that point of moving to Brooklyn, they were off. That's a whole other story, folks. They were offering wonderful concessions on leases, 3 months free on a 15-month lease. Right? It was a great time to be somebody trying to make that move. Now the market's flipped, and it's a landlord.
This entire webinar just a shill for Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
I haven't brought up Lancaster once.
Okay, just checking.
But if you're looking for a lower rent place, here it is. I stuck this in here. I missed that. Yes, rents in Lancaster, Pennsylvania have not increased as much for those of you looking to join me in Amish country. But you can see here that rents over time in New York City have increased drastically. And that increase has largely happened here in like Q2, Q3 of 2022. And so we get it, right? This is a huge increase in rents that we're seeing folks experience. And so to kind of summarize here, should you rent? Should you buy? It really depends. But I like to take a step back when we talk about this with clients, AJ, and ask this question. Say there are two questions that we need to answer. Number one is, if you're looking at a house, can you afford it? Do your financial circumstances allow you to buy the house if the interest rate is 6.75%, 30 years, and the cost is this much, okay? And are there concerns about macroeconomic factors impacting that? That's question number one, okay? Sometimes we just stop the analysis there. The answer is yes, you can do it, that's fine.
Yes, let's go. Yep.
Okay, if you're gonna ask me, is now a good time to buy a house? I'm not sure. Rates are the highest place they've been in 15 years. Supply is tight. It's not a great market. That might not be a good reason to pump the brakes, but I think it's a two-pronged question, and you probably want to know the answer to both. But if the answer is yes to number one, number two doesn't matter a ton. It's just something to think about. So,
right.
AJ, want to talk about other factors?
Yeah, just what's important to you. If buying this home is the deepest desire of your heart, and you've got a kid who's going to be born in 8 months or 6 months.
Or heading off to kindergarten soon, right?
Or heading off to kindergarten soon, or we have a school district situation. Yeah, probably a great reason. If we check the box off on that, can we afford it? Does it make sense financially? Is it a good time? Who cares, right? We talked about all those other things. This is a long-term commitment, right? Once we buy the house, we're stuck with it, but we can refinance in a couple of years. So that huge dramatic difference we saw between rates, that's not actually likely what's going to happen in reality. There are opportunities throughout your home ownership timeline to correct for that, to potentially get a lower interest rate. John, I hope your parents were able to refinance in the early 90s.
They were eventually, yes.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
So other resources we got, brooklynfi.com/events. The recording of this will be up there in the next few days. We've got the New York Times rent versus buy calculator. They rolled this out. I can't believe it's 2014 now. It makes me feel old, but still great data in there. And then we got the
Beautiful.
BrooklynFi mortgage calculator as well.
Yep. Fantastic. I think we're ready for questions.
Yeah. Drop them in the chat, drop them in the Q&A, but there's a
few.
few here.
What do we have here? Do you have any specific advice to NYC, such as renting versus buying in the city, renting in the city and buying in the country?
Ooh.
New York City housing market is always hot. It's the best place to live in the world. So why would you not want to live here? Yeah, right now rents in the city are terrible. They're really high. We are hearing stories of rents being raised 30, 50, 75. I've even heard of 100% recently. That was a new one for me. So probably renting right now in New York City feels impossible for some people. We're actually seeing people leave the city because they just can't afford it. So in terms of, this is opinion, right? Walking in the door, I can afford to buy a house. Should I rent or should I buy right now? Probably a good time to think about buying. If that's part of your financial plan and that's in your life plan that you want to be in New York City for at least 7 years. The idea of renting in the city and buying in the country, that's a lot harder to pull off. The two residents, oh, well, we want to buy something, so let's buy something that's going to be a great weekend place that we can go to. That's going to be, a half or a third of the cost as the apartment in New York. But essentially, maybe you're getting the best of both worlds sometimes, but you're getting the worst of both worlds for all the things we talked about in terms of, rent increases in the city and then all the potential home costs, the unknown costs of that house in the country. During the pandemic, this question was brought to us over and over and over again. I can't live in my 1-bedroom apartment with my partner and our kid because we both have to work from home, and this literally doesn't work. We have to go outside the city. So we talked a lot about, let's buy a country house upstate, or let's buy something in the Poconos near John. You're near the Poconos, right?
Not entirely at the moment, no,
okay.
But that's fine.
AJ's
not good at geography, folks.
No, I'm not good at U.S. geography. Does that actually make sense? So I'm not a big fan of the we can't have choice A, so let's go to choice B, which is going to satisfy those things. I think last time in our webinar, we went really in on don't buy upstate because these are the hidden things that you don't know about. Just something to keep in mind. So buy if you can in the city. Trying to buy 2 houses instead of 1 is not a win for me.
Yeah, agree. And I think, to the next question, is renting wasteful in that you're not investing money into property that you own? I mean, you could make an argument that having a mortgage is wasteful because you're spending potentially a few $1,000s a month in mortgage interest, right? If we go back to some of those examples, $60,000 a year in mortgage interest is $5,000 a month. You can get, even in New York City, $5,000 a month get you pretty far rent-wise. And so be mindful that there are pros and cons to each, and housing is an expense. It's not an investment necessarily. And if we look at it through that lens, then it helps us make much more rational decisions.
Yep, absolutely. Is it a bad time to buy? Should we wait? I think we've covered this fairly extensively. Not a great time, but if it's in your plan and you're ready to go for it, go for it. It's not the worst time. It's not a hell no from us here at Brooklyn FI. We've got
AJ,
quite.
I was gonna say, we got a few in here. Should I toss them up to you here?
Go for it. Let's do it.
So one question that came in is, do you have specific advice on how to facilitate this conversation with a partner? It's such an emotional topic.
Talk. You have to talk about it, right? So how do we facilitate that? We schedule we don't bully our partner with Zillow links, right? That's what you don't do, right? I do that. I did that. It was not good, right? We're not like, hey, look at this house. We have to buy it. Let's go. I'm going to see it this weekend. Are you coming? No, that's the decision you made. Make sure that your partner is along for the ride. Schedule time to have this conversation. Have your Brooklyn FI financial planner give you the resources that you need to have the conversation. Book 15 minutes of that to have the conversation. You need help facilitating it because it's a huge decision, and your partner may have a different opinion, and you have to both be prepared to understand the other person's point of view. One of you might say the deepest desire of my heart is to buy a cabin on the river upstate, and the other person says, I don't like the outside, I want to stay in the city. That's probably beyond John and I's expertise in terms of couples counseling. That's probably a great reason to go to couples therapy, to talk through these big financial questions. I would say the decision the decision of whether to have children and the decision of whether to buy a house are kind of equal in terms of the weight and the change it's going to have in your life. What else we got?
Absolutely.
Great question. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, I'll take the next one here, which is, if we do head into a recession, would that be a better market for buying? That's a great question. It really depends. Every recession is different. And so going back to some of those charts doesn't necessarily mean that the buying market's going to get drastically better if we do head into a recession. The recession that I think is most in our recent memory when we think about housing is 2008, 2009, which was a real estate, induced financial crisis, which brought down the housing market significantly. This may not be the case at all this time around. And so it's really hard to tell. I think there's also the factor to consider is like the microeconomic piece of a recession is like, is your job okay? Is your income stable? Because even if the housing market goes on sale, you might not be in a position to make that $250,000 down payment anymore. So yeah, I think we're good on that one. Got another question here. Let's say my parents offer to buy a house and then have us pay them a mortgage at a lower rate. Can I deduct the interest on this personal mortgage, or does it need to be through a bank?
Ooh,
yes.
Good question. Yeah, it's got to be through a bank. Yeah, whoever is on. Oh, go ahead, John.
Well, it depends, right? So yes, and so if your family I think this is a question here is like, if they buy the house, that's different than if you were to buy the house and they were to be your lender, and you were to have a note that had a stated interest rate that was in line with federal guidelines, then you can write that off. They'd have to give you a 1098 as well. I've seen families do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a possibility, but you need to buy the house. They need to essentially be the bank in that in that situation.
Can be done. Great.
Let's see. Lily writes, with all the different pieces and logistical partners involved at the beginning of beginning to be serious about home buying, what comes first? The real estate agent, mortgage approval. What order do you recommend? I think talking to Brooklyn Fi financial planner comes first before anything else.
Yes, that is first. I would say second is, okay, we're ready to do it. I think mortgage approval is a great place to start, just because it forces you to get serious because you're talking to a bank. It does put all of your documents in line, and you will get an answer of, Brooklyn Fi can sit here and tell you all day, like, oh, you can afford this house, everything's cool. A bank will tell you, here is how much house you can afford. You got approved to buy a $1 million house. So what we talk about, what we're talking about is mortgage pre-approval, which is pretty light. It's a soft pull on your credit. I'm sorry, no, it's a hard pull on your credit. So it will be, you don't want to like constantly be applying for mortgages, but if you've never done it before, go for it. And essentially you get a letter from the bank that says, X person was approved. We plan to potentially lend them $1 million. So whatever offer they're going to make on your house should be okay. You will need mortgage pre-approval to put offers in on many properties in competitive markets. During the pandemic, when real estate agents did not want just any, Zillow watcher coming in, you actually had to have a mortgage pre-approval letter to even go to the open house to prove that you were serious. So I would say
a ticket to admission, essentially.
There you go. Yeah, talk to your financial planner, mortgage pre-approval, and then real estate agent comes in to kind of guide you through the process once you have that pre-approval, because I love real estate agents. They're some of my favorite people, but we have seen situations where agents can be a little bit pushy in terms of like, oh, your budget's 1.3. Well, look at this 1.475 I just found for you. With that pre-approval, you hand that to the agent. They know your price range. They know that they should be showing you things about that. So great question.
Another question that came in, we got a lot of questions here still. Why not buy the house upstate? Mark asked, and I think that's a great question. It's something we dealt with a lot with clients during the pandemic, and so I think if the reason for buying the houses upstate is that you've gone upstate, you've maybe rented upstate for a year or two, you see a future for you and your family upstate, maybe you're from upstate, you can work there, you don't need to be traveling in and out of the city constantly. That's a very different conversation from a house is the most important thing to me, but with the budget I have, I can only afford a house upstate. Therefore, I'm going to do that, because what we found a lot of folks is they do that and they're really unhappy. And it's a very big change. And so we need to be mindful of those factors, I would say. AJ, anything to add? You had a lot of those combos.
Yeah, I think that the main thing to think about is, are we making a decision for the short term? Let's define the short term as the next 2 years versus the long term, which I'm going to say is the next 5 years. I don't want to say 30 years because that's not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
In 5 years, are you going to have the same job that's going to allow you to work upstate for 2 months during the summer? Are you going to still have that same car? Are you going to still have that same size family? Like, is it going to be realistic for you to do that? My second must-have is I need you to both partners need to pull out their calendars and identify 10 weekends over the next year that you will be going to that house upstate. And if you
I don't know if this question was a vacation home or a permanent home upstate, which I think is another factor, to think
good
about.
Question. Yeah, I was thinking of it more as a second home based on that other question before. But yeah, to either way, if it's a vacation home, find the weekends. If you can't find 10, it's definitely a no. Also spend a month in that town in a rented Airbnb before you buy. If it's a permanent move upstate, yeah, same reasons. Are you able to find the right schools for your kids? Is that a place you want to stay for 7 years?
Yeah. A couple more questions that came in these times. Are there advantages to overpaying on the down payment 30% instead of 20%? I'll take this one. Generally speaking, I would say no. Right now, we've experienced a 20 to 25% sell-off in the market, and the forward-looking returns from historically from these types of sell-offs are very attractive. And so to put capital that could grow at a fairly significant rate because valuations are down, to work in a diversified manner versus an illiquid, undiversified manner, I would say is an inefficient choice. But there's a lot of factors that go into that, including your cash flow situation, how much monthly payment you can tolerate, those sorts of things.
I would say one of the only good reasons to pay more is if we remember that family gift that we talked about. If there's a significant family gift, that would be a great reason to put down more. Just put it down, make sure your payment's lower. That's probably the only time that I would recommend putting down more than required.
Jocelyn asks, what general advice do you have on buying a multifamily house as a step toward real estate investing? How do banks look at mortgages for investment versus personal purposes?
Good question. We typically don't think of real estate as investing. That's just the Brooklyn FI philosophy. A house is a place to live and to be with your family and to enjoy your time at home. If we want to invest, we want to grow our capital, we look to the stock market. So it's kind of a hard stop for us, right, John? It's like if we're considering this. And the other thing you have to think about when we're talking about multifamily is, are we ready to be a full-time landlord? Is that a career that we're interested in? For some people, it's like, I love real estate, I love renovating, I'm really handy, and I do want to do this. Then maybe we start to talk about it, like what would some of those mortgages look like and things like that.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the bank question, I mean, banks are looking at debt to income, they're looking at your savings, they're looking at your overall debt situation. I don't think the factors are drastically different. I'm not a banker though either. And so it's a good question to ask folks as you're exploring this. Another question that came in was, does either the rent or buy tools or Brooklyn FI tools allow us to see the impact of the mortgage interest deduction on yearly cost? I think the question is like, how much tax savings are we getting here? Our team can help with that as part of your tax projection to kind of show you. Typically speaking,
but everyone's going to be different, right?
Everybody's going to be different, but it's a number we can help show you. Typically speaking, it's not as great as you think. It doesn't move the needle a ton in terms of how much house you can afford. I know our financial planning software, Right Capital, does factor it into the longer term projections as well for our clients. So yeah, it
can be done. It's not, it's not an easy thing to show on a quick calculator because there's so many other whenever we talk about personal taxes, online calculators almost never are sufficient.
Yeah. So those are all the questions that we had, folks, but so glad that everybody could join us here today and come on board for this fun rent versus buy part 2.
I had fun.
AJ, it's been a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, John. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. It's great to see so many familiar faces and lots of new faces as well.
Lots of new faces as well.
Thanks for being a part of Brooklyn FI. We love you all. Happy house hunting or happy trying to negotiate your rent down. Have a beautiful weekend, and we'll see you on the emails.
Take
Bye,
care,
guys.
everybody.